Hello, my name's Aule Ikediashi, and I'm going to be talking about gender conflict theory and gender roles. So, what is gender conflict theory? It was a theory first proposed by the German philosopher Karl Marx in the 19th century, and the conflict states that tensions and conflicts arise when resources, status, and power are unevenly distributed between groups in society, and that these conflicts become the engine for social change. In the gender context, gender conflict theory argues that gender is best understood as men attempting to maintain power and privilege to the detriment of women. The definition of gender roles are the attitudes, behaviors, rights, and responsibilities that particular cultural groups associate with or assume with our assigned or assumed sex. And age, race, and another variety of factors can also further determine and influence these as well. Gender role relation. This theory relates to gender roles because men are expected to be masculine, hold the power in which they have more access to opportunity, whereas women still do not. Women are expected to dress feminine, act feminine, and be accommodating and nurturing, and also be dependent on men. Gender roles were appropriate in times of the hunter and gatherer society. However, due to the dominant group naturally working to maintain their status and power, gender roles have persisted to exist in today's society due to the conflict perspective. According to the conflict theory, social problems are created when dominant groups oppress subordinate groups. Historically, because men held most of the world's resources, women had to depend on men due to the lack of access and opportunity they had. The historical view of gender roles during the Victorian era, which was during the 19th century, approximately 1837 to 1901, women were not allowed to improve their conditions through education, occupation, or emotional experience, and they had to deny emotional fulfillment and desire to have roles in relation to men in society. The main role of women was to take part in their husband's business and interests, also learn housewife skills before marriage, such as cleaning, cooking, weaving, and childcare. Continued, the woman's role during the Victorian era also consisted of them being feminine, pure, and clean, and their role was to give birth and look after the house. Women did not have legal say, which meant they did not have the right to vote or own property, and they were seen as shy, weak, and emotional compared to men, and were forced to have a private life in order to stay pure for a husband, or else they were unwanted, which equaled in them having no freedom. However, on the contrary, the men's role was seen as being strong, brave, and hardworking, and their role was to be the protector and the lord of the household, and needed recognition of manhood from their peers, and also had possession of all sorts of freedom in comparison to women, and were expected to achieve a level of material success in the wider world. The gender conflict theory relates to this because it explains the acceptance of gender norms during the Victorian era by men having more power and privilege than women do. Men got to maintain their power by being the one who owned the home, while women did not have any legal say, like mentioned earlier, such as voting rights nor home ownership. While men had all the freedom, it was normal in this society for women to experience a private life, or else she would not be wanted as a wife. In the Victorian era, a woman's main role was to please the man, therefore restricting them from basic human rights and almost being seen as an object, whereas men's roles were to please society's expectations of manhood, in addition to having more freedom and privilege in comparison to women. United States contemporary view on gender roles. As for gender roles in the United States within the last 5 years, it seems that gender roles are less accepted today than they were in the past. However, despite the progress, gender roles remain almost the same in some aspects. According to a meta-analysis study, the social roles of women and men have changed since the mid-20th century, with more women entering the male-dominated occupations in the labor force. However, many women still experience horizontal segregation, which results in them receiving less pay than men in the same exact occupation, and this represents gender roles still being present in today's society by men experiencing more dominant privilege. The top 3 common occupations for women in the U.S. involve care for others, such as nurturing, that involves school-age teachers, registered nurses, and administrative assistants. And women in heterosexual relationships still do a disproportionate amount of domestic housework in comparison to men, such as childcare responsibilities and household cleaning. Gender role stereotypes portrayed in the media. Women in the media are defined solely on the basis of their appearance or their behavior in relationships, which resulted in them having limited personality traits and roles. In the media, women were defined by their physical appearance and beauty and sex appeal as central value. While women were seen as romantic and frail, men were seen as aggressive, fearless, and brave. And according to a study done, top films released in 2010 to 2013 had a ratio of 7.6 men reported working in STEM, which were science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, compared to 1 woman. Men were portrayed as less successful at domestic chores such as cooking, cleaning, and childcare compared to women. As for the religious views of gender roles, members of the Christian community had 2 views on gender roles, which was complementarianism and egalitarianism. Complementarianism was the belief that men and women have different roles and responsibilities, thus they complement each other. Egalitarianism is the belief that men and women have equal roles and responsibilities regardless of their gender differences. Complementarians also do believe that males have the intrinsic authority of hierarchy over females in marriage and church ministry. Conflict theory in relation to contemporary views in the U.S. So this conflict theory relates to the contemporary views in the U.S., how gender roles are still accepted in today's society. For example, the theory pays attention to problems involving the pay gap between men and women, as men still do have higher annual pay due to living in a male-dominated society. However, as society shifts more towards egalitarianism, which sees men and women as equal, the gender conflict theory supports the movement toward equal role status among men and women. To conclude, the gender conflict theory also relates to both the historical and the contemporary view, however, in different ways. In the historical context, because women's rights were not developed yet, women had no problem conforming to gender roles due to it being their only way to have a future, such as marriage, have children, and a family. However, women did have to depend on men, and women did not know what other opportunities they were capable of at the time. However, in the contemporary context, theory applies in a different way. Due to progress we have made with women's rights, such as the right to vote, home ownership, and job opportunities, the conflict theory relates more to this society. This is due to women fighting for equality, such as domestic work and equal pay, while men are still fighting to keep their dominance. Continuing on this conclusion, I feel within the next 5 years that we will make small progress in unlearning the concept of gender roles, as the United States has already started to participate in nonconformity. However, I do expect great change among gender roles within the next 100 years, even though it is in a different lifetime. I think that we have come some time already, and hopefully within the next century we will no longer have a glass ceiling for women, and they will also receive equal pay, in addition to men taking on roles that women have done for centuries. Thank you for listening to my presentation. These are my references.